In the last frozen heartbeat between life and death, Kel's snarling blade was narrowing towards Donna's breast. 71 was a blur in Donna's hand as it came smashing down on the thrusting blade with stunning force. Both chainswords shrieked defiantly as their spinning teeth struck, binding together for a fraction of a second before being flung violently apart. Donna recovered her guard position with a practiced flick of the wrist. Kel's heavier blade swung wildly and gouged a bloody furrow across his thigh. The bounty hunter shrieked a curse and staggered backwards. The crowd roared its approval at the unexpected comeback. Donna straightened up from the bar and let 71 idle quietly for a moment. The watching gangers all fell silent, enwrapped by the unfolding drama. "You know, Kel," she spat through gritted teeth. "Poisons are funny things. Not 4 shifts ago, I was stung by sludge jellies, in the sword arm no less, and it feels just fine now. I guess it's been poisoned enough already." That was a lie. Donna's forearm felt a fire as if it had been dipped in a bowl of biting insects, but it certainly wasn't paralyzed. Kel was trying to clamp the flow of blood from his thigh with one hand while keeping his blade up with the other. The more he bled out, the weaker he would get, so now it was Donna's turn to gloat and let the shock set in for a moment. Besides, Donna had a lot of frustrations to exercise, and she wanted to savor the moment. She stalked towards the bounty hunter with a murderous gleam in her beautiful blue eye. "I've had bounty scum like you on my ass ever since I came down here." "And what a great ass," some wag shouted from the audience. Normally, she would have mained whoever said that on principle, but right now she barely even noticed it. "And if there's one thing I hate about all of you," she continued, "it's that you're not in it for money, like you claim, or for justice or protecting hivers." She fired up 71 again, its low snarl accentuating her words. "No, you do it for the glory. You do it so you can strut around and pretend you're better than the scum you're hunting. You do it so you can hurt people and claim you had to do it, that you had no choice. Well, we all get to make choices. You made yours, and now I'm going to show you mine." Donna advanced with her sword held loosely at a low guard. "I'm going to leave your arms and face until last, Kel, so you can keep fighting for as long as you feel like," she told him, and took a lazy cut that forced him to limp backwards. She circled like a merciless predator. "Trying to ambush me in Glory Hole was enough reason to kill you on its own, but the crap you've been spouting tonight." She shook her head, and her long dreadlocks swayed with emotion. Her voice became a husky tocsin of utter menace. "For that, I'm going to carve you up first." Donna leapt into the fray, bellowing a murderous shriek and whirling 71 like a dervish. Kel presented the parry, but Donna's first move was only a feint. She whirled around him at the last instant, making a straight-armed cut at his backside. Her chain blade struck home, ripping through the heavy material of Kel's flat coat and its lining of mesh armor like paper. The bounty hunter howled as the relentless teeth chewed off a meaty slice of haunch and upper thigh before glancing off his hip bone. The blade splattered crimson rain across the bar, and the spectators cheered again with bloodlust. Kel slid awkwardly onto one knee in a spreading pool of his own gore. Donna was still moving, slamming 71 down like a guillotine on Kel's exposed foot. The chainsword Donna, called 71, became 76 in that instant, tearing through boot, tarsi, and metatarsi to send Kel's 5 toes rolling away like fat, wriggling maggots. Donna spun away with a pretty dancing step she had been taught when she was 6. She pirouetted around her prey, forcing Kel to drag his mangled foot over hard-packed dirt and broken glass to keep facing her. Kel alternated between blubbering incoherently and screeching as Donna dodged in with her blade biting again and again. He tried to lunge at her, so she took an ear and left it dangling by a scrap of scalp. Donna laid open her opponent's shoulder so that the glistening bone of his scapula could be seen peeking out. She carved through ribs and into a lung to make a wound that blew out pink froth in time with Kel's ragged breathing. A dozen other nicks and gouges marked his quivering body as she teased and caressed it lovingly with 76. She was making Kel into her fetish doll, venting her pent-up anger and frustration on his wretched form. She spun round faster, wilder. Even hardened gangers blanched and turned away as she stripped Kel's flesh from his bones. He could barely stay upright now, swaying and gurgling as his lifeblood leaked out of torn flesh. The blade clattered from his nerveless hand. Somewhere in Kel's wrecked body, a spark of defiance still burned. He clawed at his holster, painstakingly dragging out his bolt pistol. Donna laughed. "Come on, Kel, last chance." She stopped and posed for a moment, letting him raise a shaking arm to take aim. Gangers scattered from the line of fire behind her. Kel pulled the trigger and sent a bolt round roaring off to explode against the bar. Naturally, Donna was no longer there. A flesh girl started screaming shrilly. Donna leapt behind Kel and jammed her own gun against the back of his bald skull. Another bolt round roared off from his pistol, this time exploding in flesh with an obscene smacking sound. Donna felt an almost orgasmic sense of release as she pulled the trigger, spreading Kel's brains out across the dirt floor of the unwelcome inn. The shot was a shout of ecstasy in her ears. The bolt was her incandescent euphoria as it burned his hated skull to ash. In the momentary warm afterglow, Donna looked down and found to her surprise that she had shot him with the pig. There wasn't much of Kel left that wasn't charred and smoking. The whole bar erupted with gunfire. For a split second, Donna thought they were saluting her somehow. Bullets came zipping past, close enough for her to feel. No, they were shooting at each other. As she dived out of the firing line, she found that they were shooting at her, too. Auto pistol rounds tracked holes in the bar next to her as she ran, and a shotgun blast kicked up an eruption of dirt at her feet. Bodies were dropping everywhere, arms jerking and flailing as they were hit. Donna ran for an exit amidst scenes of unmitigated mayhem. Gangers flipped tables into barricades and went at it even as their friends and enemies got blasted into meat puppets around their ears. Vicious hand-to-hand brawling and point-blank shooting was quickly defining three groups. The Orlocks were congregating at one end of the bar, the Cotter at the other, the Goliaths and Donna in the middle, and a lot of twitching corpses in between. Donna had no hesitation running for cover with the leather-clad Orlocks. They whooped and waved her on, putting down a creditable covering fire. It was an easy choice for her to make, since the Goliaths would have skinned her in an instant, and the Cotter would no doubt burn her for being a she-harlot or something. Orlocks, on the other hand, hated Delake like Kel with a passion, and also they just liked to have a good time. She cracked a Goliath's shaven skull as she ran towards them to return the compliment. "Thanks, boys," she cried, bounding behind a table. It was quite intimate in there, with about 20 Orlocks wedged in behind 5 tables. They were grinning happily and blazing away. Hot, jingling shell casings rained everywhere. The mad release of tension Donna had felt seemed to be contagious. The Orlocks were working out their frustrations with firepower too. The Orlock nearest her turned and shouted something, but Donna couldn't hear a word of it over the constant rattle of auto fire. He nodded at the door. Donna saw that the Orlocks were moving off, dragging their wounded out the exit first. Donna checked the pig. It was out of juice just as she'd feared. Holstering it, she unsheathed her last pistol and stood, snapping off a couple of shots. She only half-aimed, since the shots were meant to keep the Orlock sweet than actually do any damage. The first shot, however, took a Cotter smack in the forehead, putting a smoking third eye through his penitent hood and straight into his brain. The second hit was equally miraculous, taking down a Goliath with a solid body hit at the other end of the bar. The Orlocks whooped and yelled even louder, battering her with comradely punches as she ducked back down. A frag grenade went off in the bar as Donna was crawling for the door, and the indiscriminately scything shrapnel signaled a general exodus for all parties. The Cotter poured out of the other exit, and the Goliaths forced their own way out, through a wall in typically brutal fashion. The pitched battle inside turned into a running battle through the twisting alleyways outside. Every door and corner seemed to be lit with gun flashes. Gangers darted everywhere, loosing off shots at half-seen shapes in the darkness, and smoke and flames billowing out of the bar gave the scene a ruddy, hellish quality. Anarchy was running naked through the streets of Dustfalls with all guns blazing. Donna and a pack of maybe a dozen Orlocks from different gangs rallied in the nearby street. The Orlocks seemed to have lashed onto Donna as a lucky charm in the confusion. Her height and swinging mass of stained blonde dreadlocks made her nice and easy to spot in the dark too, she thought ruefully. She was still wondering how to get rid of the Orlocks when Hanno arrived on the scene. Even in the dark, and from the other end of the street, Donna could see that Hanno was about ready to burst a blood vessel. He had a gang of watchmen with him, all armed to the teeth, and a trailing crowd of Escher, Vansar, and Delicate from the other slog shop. Hanno spotted Donna and started striding forwards with a face like thunder. At that moment, a group of Goliaths appeared out of another alley and let fly at the Orlocks, who retaliated in kind. The watchmen intervened, loosing off scatter rounds at both gangs. All sides went diving for cover, and another gun battle erupted in earnest. More gangers were drawn to the noise, and the fight soon crackled up in intensity like a flash fire. Donna saw Hanno leading the watchmen forwards by bounds, determinedly trying to force apart the warring factions with shotgun blasts and gun butts. She certainly didn't want to be around by the time he reached her vicinity. "Time to go, boys. It's been real fun," Donna called to the Orlocks, and then ran off down the street. To her dismay, the Orlocks took this as a piece of sage tactical advice and ran straight after her. The Goliaths chased the Orlocks, the Watchmen chased both groups, and the gangers followed the Watchmen. Donna had no clue where the Cawdor had gone until she reached the stockade and found the gate was wide open. The zealous bigots of House Cawdor had decided to go out and start their own ugly little war with the Scabbies. They hadn't gotten far. The rubble outside was littered with Cawdor and Scabby bodies. A knot of die-hard hoodheads was making a last stand in the lee of a large slab out in the waste zone. They were surrounded by at least 10 times their number of Scabbies and going down fast. It sounded like they were singing psalms. Donna, the Orlocks, the Goliaths, the Watchmen, and then everybody else careered out of the gate and into the fight with all the subtlety and tactical acumen of a blinded Milisaur. They hit the back of the Scabbies and killed a score of them before the ragged horde realized it was being attacked from 2 sides at once. The Cawdor immediately rallied and started forging a path through the Scabbies with fanatical fervor. The anarchic battle that had started inside Dustfalls now engulfed the waste zone outside, and shots flew like hail. Donna was never sure how she survived the encounter. The Scabbies were a threat to all but beyond that it was every gang for themselves. There were over 200 fighters around her, duking it out with everything from sharp rocks to plasma cannons. It became one of the larger gunfights in Underhive history, and it certainly was the biggest, most chaotic brawl Donna had ever seen. She weaved through the fight, loosing off shots at the Scabbies and slashing at them in her path. She needed a way out, any way out, but all around her were brawling gangers and darting mutants. Bullets whined about her, and last rounds hissed back and forth in a deadly crescendo, underscored by the throaty bark of bolter rounds and the wild rattling of autoguns. There was no shelter. Every rubble pile or shallow trench was fiercely fought over with its own knot of besiegers and besieged. It was a measure of Donna's desperation that she found the safest place to be was actually fighting the Scabbies in hand-to-hand combat. If she was being shot at, the Scabbies were just as likely to hit her opponents as herself. She kept ducking and diving, trying to work her way towards the abyss through the seething ebb and flow of battle. That was working fine until she ran up against the Scabby giant. Who knows what bad zone radhole spawned that monstrosity, or what random mix of chemicals and poisons conspired to throw up a chance mutation like that. But life always found a way to survive and thrive, no matter how ugly the results were. This was the stuff of childhood nightmares. Its bullet-shaped head and slab-muscled shoulders towered above Mad Donna. Spade-like claws and a thickly scaled hide completed its inhuman appearance. Incongruously human-looking mismatched eyes, one green and one blue, were the only things betraying its true parentage. It looked far from human when it tossed aside the broken body of a ganger and lumbered towards Donna, its slit mouth bellowing a wordless challenge. Ducking under a reaching claw, she slashed at a wrist thicker than her thigh, but 76 skidded off its iron-hard scales. The giant chuckled as it sent her reeling with a casual backhand. Donna's ears were left ringing by the glancing blow. The giant was slow, but one hit was all it needed to snap her bones and incapacitate her. She could see more Scabbies closing in out of the corner of her eye, taking confidence from the fearsome presence of their bigger brother. Donna desperately needed an edge to even the odds, but the pig was already out of juice, and it was her only weapon capable of taking down something so big. Scurrying backward over the treacherous rubble, she saw that she was being forced closer to the edge of the abyss. She made a snap decision and ran straight for a spar jutting over the dizzying gulf, with the scaly giant lumbering right at her heels. Flakes of rust and chunks of rubble fell from the rotting spar as she ran out onto it, and the whole thing vibrated alarmingly in time with her footsteps. Donna sheathed 76, turned, and faced her foe with the inky void at her feet. The gigantic mutant hesitated at the brink with almost comic uncertainty written on its bestial face. Donna felt a brief flash of hope that it might just give up and go find someone else to eviscerate. No such luck. It carefully placed one broad foot on the spar and stretched out to seize her with its ape-like arms. The metal creaked in protest under its weight. Donna ducked beneath its scaly arms and desperately fired her last pistol into its face. The shot only singed, but that was enough to make the giant rear back, its arms wind-milling for balance. She hung on for dear life as the rusting beam shook wildly, and then aimed a vicious kick at the creature's ankle. Her thick boot heel struck bone with a satisfying crunch. The giant grunted in surprise and teetered past the fatal point of no return, gathering speed like a falling pillar as it pitched sidewise into the abyss with a disconsolate wail. Donna almost fell off too, trying to watch him disappear into the darkness below. Scavies were skulking on nearby heaps of rubble. They had long muskets, and bullets zinged off metal and rocks near Donna, but nothing came even close to hitting her. Generally speaking, Scavies were the most appalling shots, and had poor weaponry to go with it, but they compensated by making sure numbers were most definitely on their side. There was no going back that way, not for a while at least. Donna holstered her last pistol and hung off the spar with both hands so she could swing along beneath it and get some cover. As she did so, she spotted a cracked half-pipe jutting out below the edge of the dome floor nearby. It was hard to ignore the vast, hungry gulf at her back as she clambered over to the pipe, but Donna didn't freeze and made it across before her strength gave out. A rank stench and an ooze of old slurry flowing from the pipe told her it was for waste disposal, but she wasn't fussy. It was this or go back into battle, and Donna reckoned she had seen her fill of fighting for this shift. She decided that she definitely would rather crawl away down a pipe full of effluent. A crackling sound and a shower of sparks over on the roadway caught her attention and distracted her from the earnest enforcer Hano. At first she thought there had been some kind of accident among the lines of moving vehicles, but then she looked more closely at the roadway and realized she was mistaken. It wasn't a solid road at all. It was a wide, grid-like mesh of thick rails that fizzled and spluttered with vagrant electricity in the cloying mist. A vehicle breaking away from the steadily moving traffic stream had caused the sparks. It had jumped onto different rails that curved over to the walkway where she and Hano stood. As the vehicle drew closer, Donna saw a blank-eyed servitor at the controls. It was severed at the waist and attached to a turntable at the prow. A long, narrow hole covered by a grimy plastic-glazed cabin stretched back behind it, large enough to carry perhaps 12. At the rear of the felucca, a larger turntable bore what looked like a huge crab claw, but instead of gripping the rails, it only touched them with its 2 points, seeming to stick there and carry the whole weight of the craft. The arcane sciences of electromagnetism were at work. Dion waited for Hano to open the door for her before going on board first, intending to turn at the threshold and send him away. She was so shocked at what she saw inside, however, she completely forgot about him for a moment. The narrow bench seats inside the felucca showed that it was intended for transporting at least 40 or 50 people, with overhead rails for others to steady themselves while standing. Dion was mortified at the idea of so many people crushing themselves into the filthy vehicle, and was glad that the nose plugs kept out the stink of the unwashed. Although the felucca was only half full at most, Dion stood and gripped a rail. She couldn't face sitting on one of the... Hano stepped neatly aboard behind her and slid the door shut. Without further delay, the felucca swung on its turntable and started picking up speed in the direction of the main traffic flows. Dion suddenly saw that the streams of vehicles hung both above and below the rails. Weaving, splitting, and rejoining, their head and tail lamps made knotwork traceries in the mist. Buildings swirled past. Great slabs like tombstones pierced by roads at different levels, skeletal towers covered in lights, squat-looking steely ziggurats, all different, all ugly. Enforcer Hano took off his helmet and regarded her levelly, as if about to say something. He had cropped hair that was graying at the temples, and a craggy, not displeasing countenance. Dion would have labeled honest if it weren't for his eyes. They were pale gray and all too sharp, glittering from his otherwise impassive face, like stab lights, probing, examining, weighing, and measuring. Dion was frankly offended, and responded with a look that was withering enough to send Enforcer Hano's gaze skating off elsewhere. She pointedly turned back to watching Hive City slide past. They were descending between 2 towering blocks interconnected by a multitude of bridges, or it might have been a single block cloven through by the road. It was hard to be sure. Without warning, the felucca juddered to a halt, almost throwing Dion off her feet. She looked up, expecting to see the blocks sliding past vertically as they fell to their deaths, but saw they were stationary, aside from a slight swaying that may have been her own unsteadiness. Without thought, she sat down on one of the benches with a bump. Near-death experiences were coming way too thick and fast at present, and she was feeling distinctly weak at the knees. Hano creaked uncomfortably in his armor, and tried to sound formal and comforting at the same time. Swing shift, noblewoman. There's always a power drop, so they clamp off the road net temporarily to avoid accidents. Here they come now. He was looking out of the grimy plastiglass window at the bridges, Dion realized, and all the other vehicles had stopped too, just as he had said. She looked down in horrid fascination. Where the bridges had been all but empty before, they were now filling with the tiny dots of moving people. Thousands, tens of thousands thronged the bridges within sight alone. There were 2 streams on each bridge crossing in opposite directions. One stream was swift and disciplined, almost martial. The other was sluggish and meandering. One shift of proles were coming off the lines and returning to their habs, and another shift was coming from their habs and going to the lines. On occasion, the 2 flows intersected in violent little swirls. At one bridge in the distance, Dion saw black-armored enforcers wading in to separate them. In another place, several tiny figures fell from one bridge onto another, the tiny ripples of their impact conveying none of the carnage they must have wrought on those below. Hanno called in something on his vox at that, and Didon turned away from the sight. It was too reminiscent of a murder less fresh than the one presently in her mind, but more painful. Dion realized immediately that Hanno wasn't addressing her. He was watching the ritual anarchy of swing shift and talking to himself. Caught up in the moment, he had voiced his inner thoughts, forgetting she was even there. He thought swing shift was stupid. Interesting. A bit of a reformist at heart too, this Hanno. She could work with that. A moment later, they jolted forward as the traffic started moving again. Dion felt a tiny stab of guilt as they swept past platforms crammed with proles. No doubt, they were waiting for Felicus like this one to take them back so they could begin their downtime. 10 precious hours in their habs before they were on the lines again. Officer Hanno, why do they fight? Dion discovered the taint wasn't as bad as she'd feared when she opened her mouth, and besides, she was going to have to get used to it. Every reason you can come up with, noblewoman. Anger, frustration, revenge, jealousy, prestige, spite, self-gratification, goods, money, men, women, drugs, even pets. There are antagonistic work gangs on different shifts that elevate quota rivalries to the level of house warfare. That's all without any real inter-house conflict to contend with. Hanno's voice was weary and edged with contempt. You haven't answered my question, Hanno. I asked why they fought, not what reasons they give you for it. Hanno looked at her shrewdly. She recognized the look of someone wanting to say something they felt was controversial and bursting to share their view with someone else. Because they have no hope of salvation. Dion decided to dig a little deeper. Really? Not shortages or austerity measures or the 80-hour work cycle? These were all things her tutors had cited as causes of unrest. Hanno shook his head. It's my belief that all these can be born, have been born in the past when men have hope of a better future. He looked back at the city outside. They were still descending, the blocks rising higher above them all the time, and the felucca passing through more and more tunnels as they wormed deeper into Hive City's guts. Did you know that some logistician has calculated that if someone fell from those bridges every time we took a breath, the newborns in the city would replace them 100-fold before we took another? We have made a place that makes and breaks men faster than we can breathe. Dion was thrilled that Hanno was so easy to draw out, and now she couldn't resist going further. No doubt, he had harbored feelings of disquiet for a long time, and had been unable to voice them to anyone. The truth is that everyone liked the sound of their own voice. The speaker just had to believe that the listener was interested in what they had to say. And how can it be made right? What would give them hope? Hanno spread his hands out helplessly. I don't know. Stupid. She had pushed too soon. Now, Hanno had reverted back to his introverted manner instead of remaining extroverted and expansive. Her tutors would have scolded her for such an elementary blunder. To speak any more on this topic would only serve to make him sullen. It was time for a subject change. Is it much further? Dawn asked in a dignified yet vulnerable voice, hoping to draw him back to his protector role. No, noblewoman. We are almost at the border of Escher territory now, proceeding to a main interchange to seek access. Predictably, Hanno put his helmet back on. Doubtless, it made him feel more comfortable after the moment of vulnerability he had shown. Encouragingly, he left his vox unconnected for the time being, so he spoke normally. Do you have a preferred point of entry, noblewoman? The closest. Very good, noblewoman. The roadway was converging with many others. plunging into a conical well where the traffic's controlled procession broke up into a maelstrom of turnoffs, docks, and laybys. The felucca came to rest at the bottom of the well beside a broad pavement of white stone. A great portcullis of glittering chrome reared above them, so baroque and heavy-looking that it had to be ornamental. Members of House Escher were scattered everywhere, but Hanno and Dion were quickly singled out and approached by armed House Escher guards in combat fatigues. They approached the enforcer warily, but not at all deferentially. Just as the stories had claimed, every member of House Escher was female. Many were craning an ear to find out what was happening. Strangers here were obviously rare. "What is your business here, enforcer? Why were we not informed of your arrival?" The house guards were brusque and edgy with Hanno, and they barely even seemed to notice Dion. She stepped between them and Hanno before he could reply, ready to deliver the lines she had been rehearsing ever since she exited the spire. "This enforcer has been good enough to accompany me here for my safekeeping," she said in her best spire accent. "I am Dion Estride, Gasilvanus Ulanti, and I formally seek sanctuary with House Escher."